In the dark shadows, in the white cold, fearlessly we search for knowledge new and old. We drink the strong spirits and read the ancient tomes. The order of the Abracast. We are the brave and the bold.
Your Holiness, after an audience with you 5 years ago in Vatican City, I met a group of American priests and seminarians who were studying in Rome. And when I happened to mention my hope that one day you would return to the United States, and that perhaps this time your visit would extend to the South and the West, when I mentioned this, those seminarians broke into applause. Today, Your Holiness, you begin just such a return visit, and today, all America applauds. In a document of the Second Vatican Council that you helped to draft, it is written, in language intelligible to every generation, the Church should be able to answer the ever-recurring questions which men ask about the meaning of this present life and of the life to come. In language intelligible to every generation. Certainly no one can speak with greater force to our own generation than you yourself. In Poland, you experienced Nazism and communism. As Pope, you suffered a terrorist attack that nearly claimed your life. Still, you proclaim that the central message of our own time, that the central message of all time is not hatred, but love. During your papacy, you have taken this message to some 68 countries. You have celebrated Mass in the ancient capitals of Europe. You have spoken words of truth and comfort on the African savannah. You have visited new churches on the islands of the Pacific. You've addressed vast gatherings throughout South America and the Far East. Now you have come back to the United States, the nation of citizens from all nations. If I might just interject something, Your Holiness, I know that in your travels you've made it a point to speak to people in their own language. Well, here in Miami, I have a suspicion that you will find many in your audience eager to hear you speak the beautiful language of Spain. But in this, the very month of your visit, we in the United States will be celebrating the 200th anniversary of our Constitution. That document says a great deal about the fundamental values in which we Americans believe. In the words of the distinguished Catholic philosopher Jacques Maritain, the founding fathers were neither metaphysicians nor theologians, but their philosophy of life and their political philosophy, their notion of natural law and of human rights, were permeated with concepts worked out by Christian reason and backed up by an unshakable religious feeling. From the first, then, our nation embraced the belief that the individual is sacred, and that as God himself respects human liberty, so too must the state. In freedom, we Americans have in these 200 years built a great country, a country of goodness and abundance. Indeed, Your Holiness, it is precisely because we believe in freedom, because we respect the liberty of the individual in the economic as well as the political sphere, that we have achieved such prosperity. We are justly proud of the Marshall Plan whose 40th anniversary was celebrated in Europe earlier this year. In Europe and elsewhere, we continue to place our might on the side of human dignity. In Latin America and Asia, we're supporting the expansion of human freedom, in particular, the powerful movement toward democracy. Yet, we Americans admit freely to our shortcomings. As you exhort us, we will listen with all our hearts. We yearn to make this good land better still. In Florida and South Carolina, in Louisiana and Texas, in Arizona, California, and Michigan, tens of thousands of Americans, more than 50 million Catholics, will greet you. They do great works, America's Catholics, in the name of their church. Here in the United States, American Catholics put their faith into action in countless ways, maintaining parochial schools that give underprivileged children in our inner cities the chance to receive a good education. Supporting the AIDS hospices established by Mother Teresa's Missionaries of Charity. And perhaps simply helping to put on a fundraising dinner for the local parish. Abroad, American Catholics likewise seek to translate their faith into deeds, whether supporting missionaries in distant lands or helping America's Knights of Columbus restore the facade of St. Peter's in Rome. But it will not be Catholics alone who greet you. Protestants of every denomination, Jews, Muslims, even many with no defined faith at all, Americans of every kind and degree or belief will wish your holiness well, responding to your moral leadership. Today's Florida sunshine is no warmer than the affection that you will meet. I began a moment ago by quoting from one document of the Second Vatican Council. Permit me to close by quoting from a second. By the hidden and kindly mystery of God's will, a supernatural solidarity reigns among men. A consequence of this is that one person's holiness helps others. Today, Americans feel this solidarity, and we thank you for the courage and sanctity, the kindness and wisdom with which you have done so much to help our troubled world. On behalf of all Americans, Your Holiness, welcome back.
The Abracast: Occult, History, Conspiracy, and Violence.
All right, welcome everybody. I'm John Towers. This is the Abracast. We're recording this evening from the COVID-19 isolation chamber that's hidden deep beneath the Stigmata Studios building in the steel buckle of the Rust Belt. Like I said, I'm John. This is the Abracast. That cold open was, of course, President Reagan, his remarks while he's the ceremony with Pope John Paul II in 1987. He's coming to America, and he actually came to Miami. He landed in Miami, and the reason he landed in Miami was because of communism. It was because of Castro and the Cubans that got exiled from their homeland. That's why Reagan was like, I think there's a lot of people here that's going to like it when you speak Spanish. So there is a book written about this triumvirate, this Reagan, Thatcher, John Paul II force of nature and how they worked together to stop, to crush Soviet communism. And it, to me, recently I've been like, I'm always enthralled, and I always get like, I get eye rolly when I see people on social media going, geez, implying or putting a funny meme up or whatever, that Jesus was a socialist. And I see where people can get mired up in this because of their uneducation, I guess, they're uninformed, whatever. But, I'm not going to get into defending it one way or the other. The thing's fluid, but the point is that the culture of the Catholic Church has shifted, and it's shifted rapidly. So that clip was in 1987. The wall fell in 89. So we're going to be examining here how fast Catholic culture has shifted and why it's, maybe we'll be talking a little bit about why it is shifting. But first we're going to start talking about how it was in the fucking 50s, man. Post-war, how anti-communist the Catholic Church was. And you're like, whoa, the Catholic Church is it's not a political movement. It doesn't have a political function. And I'm saying to you right now, yes, it fucking does. And we're going to see how well of an oiled machine the political function is and how it's being misused right now under our new guy we're going to be talking about. So the main work we're going to be discussing tonight is called American Catholics, the Catholic Americans, the Rise and Fall of Catholic Anti-Communism, by this guy named Richard Gid. I guess that's how you pronounce his name. Richard Gid Powers. We're mainly going to be focusing on the front end of this thing and the back end of this thing, and then we're going to be throwing in some contemporary articles to try to flesh out my point that I'm going to be making here. Before I get revved up, before I get going here, you can tell I'm out already. I'm going to have to do some editing magic in a second. Get your vessel of the art and raise it up to the sky, and thank our Patreon and Subscribe Star supporters, the folks that support our podcast here. Thank you guys. I've been sitting down here drinking, trying to get these articles lined up. Thank you guys for the support. I really do appreciate it. Couldn't do it without you guys. So thank you. Please consider supporting the show on Patreon or Subscribe Star if that option is available to you. Here's to you guys. Thanks. As I'm mentioning Patreon and Subscribe Star, we are having an August perk for the $5 and $10 tiers. So the degree of the red mark or the degree of the vessel of the art tiers are going to be getting a very special, very limited edition Wizard tarot card. So I'll talk a little bit about it at the end of the show after after the info dump and all this stuff, I'll stay on the hook and talk a little bit about this wizard card in case you're interested in it. It has to do with Aleister Crowley and and all of this stuff, so I don't want to spend too much time talking about it here. I mean, this is we're facing down World War IV right now, so I don't want to front load all this with tarot cards and Aleister Crowley and wizards and all this. We need to stay on point. We need to talk about communism, right? So here we go. Is that all you need to talk about? Speaking of the tarot cards, you can get them on Advertise.com. Go to the store button, scroll down. There's a page that shows off the graphics for each card, and also I do a little video talking about each little section, the first, second, third septenaries, and then the 4 suits. I do a little video explaining some of the nuances of the cards, whatever. Yeah. And then you can order them. The problem is because of the pandemic, the printers are very slow, so you just keep that in mind. I'm trying to remind everybody that if you order a set of the cards, it's going to take a while to fulfill them. Also, if you want to take a look at the cards, and I've been writing little descriptions and trying to explain the cards a little bit, and I have it all sealed up in a Google Doc that's available if you sign in to the mailing list. On top of other stuff, there's always tons of stuff on the mailing list. It's called the Fulgar Correspondentia. All right, enough. Let's go. Oh, look, it's the magic of editing. American Catholics and Catholic Americans: The Rise and Fall of Catholic Anticommunism by Richard Gid Powers. American Catholics were present at the creation of American anti-communism. They fueled the movement with their fervor, their numbers, and many of the movement's most famous, not to say notorious, leaders. But at the end, when the bell tolled for international communism, and when the last survivors of American anti-communism movement gathered in triumph to survey the ruin of their defeated enemy, American Catholics did not answer the call. Once the mainstay of the American anti-communism, American Catholics had moved on long before the final page of the anti-communism's long war with what the Catholics had called aesthetic communism was written. Where had they gone and why had they left? American Catholics, like Catholics everywhere, had been anti-communists before there was communism. At least as long before 1917, when communism established its first foothold in Russia. Their anti-communist roots went back to the mid-19th century, when popes had begun warning the faithful against communism and socialism, and evangelicals like Pius IX's Syllabus of Errors in 1864, and Leo the 13th's Rerum Novarum in 1891. The popes declared that secularism and Marxism were incompatible with Catholicism, and that communism was the great enemy of Catholicism, the ultimate expression of modern man's revolt against God. The church and civilization. It was an expression of modern man's revolt against God, the church, and civilization. But communism, in the guise of revolutionary socialism, if I had a little bell, I'd ring it. Ding, 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 ding. But communism, in the guise of revolutionary socialism, ding, 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 became an urgent issue for American Catholics and the clergy in 1911 during the anti-Catholic, anti-clerical Mexican Revolution. Bishops, priests, and nuns fleeing the slaughter of the clergy in their homeland took refuge in American Catholic monasteries, rectories, and convents, so that the American clergy heard tales at breakfast about what was in store for their church, in their towns, in their institutional learning facilities when the revolution came to America. The Mexican Revolution gave American Catholics an early sense of their isolation from other American religious groups, attitudes towards socialist revolution, when Catholics appealed to other denominations to help the beleaguered Mexican church. They were rebuffed because American Protestants and Jews had bitter memories of their own treatment at the hands of the church in Mexico and other Catholic countries. The sense of estrangement from prevailing American attitudes about socialists and later communist revolutions merged, of course, with the American church's overall sense of estrangement from the rest of the predominantly Protestant America. When American Catholics lost the sense of estrangement, it would have such a profound impact on the commitment to anti-communism, and it raises questions about whether American Catholics' sense of isolation in American society gave rise to their anti-communism, or whether their anti-communism fueled their sense of isolation. The American Catholics tended to view the 1917 Bolshevik Revolution in Russia through a Mexican lens, and to understand the Russian Revolution almost immediately, primarily an attack on the Roman Catholic Church. But early anti-communism of American Catholics was simply a priori predisposition. And soon emerged Catholics, both priests and laymen, with personal experience of the Church's plight in Russia. And they warned that the same war communism was waging against religion in Russia would be expected wherever communists gained power. The Catholic anti-communists, who did the most to tell Americans about the Soviet treatment of religion, this is important. Sorry, I don't mean to preach at you. The Catholic anti-communist who did the most to tell Americans about the Soviet treatment of religion was a Jesuit dean of Georgetown University and founder, 1919, of its Foreign Service School, Edmund A. Walsh, S.J., who received his education about Soviet communism as the director of the Papal Famine Relief Mission to Russia in 1922. This is all a lot of this is going to come up later in our story. While Edmund Walsh based his anti-communism on his first-hand experience of the persecution of the church under the revolutionary regimes, many other Catholic anti-communism stemmed from the outrage of the anti-Catholicism that was rampant through so much of the left, socialists and communists alike. The Catholic press made it a point to reprint what radicals were saying about the church. Catholic groups, like the Knights of Columbus, published tracts that collected the worst of the revolutionary left's abuse of Catholicism. Racks in the church were filled with such pamphlets as The Socialist Conspiracy Against Religion, which extracted anti-Catholic passages from classic European and Mexican socialism. The church also feared that it was in competition with communism for the loyalty of the Catholic working class. So here's the thing that I often kind of think about. you're like, I sit around thinking about this kind of shit, and yeah, sometimes I do. I mean, listen to me. But, so I think that, tying our taxes into... Here I am steepling my fingers. Tying the collection of taxes and the redistribution of wealth through the government, tying that into charity was like one of the biggest propaganda kind of things that happened to the church. Like, instead of community-based charity, giving your money to the government and then having them distribute it as they see fit, with treadmills for shrimp and research on gay frogs and all this kind of stuff. So, I think that just that simple tweak, that simple adjustment to the narrative allowed... I believe it's killing the church, any church. I gave it the office. Literally. I gave it the office in my fucking paycheck. You see what I'm saying? In America, unlike Europe, Catholic workers still strongly identified with the church. The church did not want to lose their loyalty, and so members of the American Federation of Labor Catholic Unionists preached a working class brand of anti-communism to their co-religionists and the rest of the union movement. One of the most vigorous of these early Catholic labor the electrical workers and the editors of its paper, Collins would remind his Catholic audience of the savage attacks on the Catholic Church, with the socialist look upon their greatest enemy, Victor Berger. Since the great conflict of the future will between the Black International, whoa now, that's not a racist thing, that's what the Catholic Church is called, and the Red International, whoa, that's just what socialism is called. Patrick Scanlon of the Brooklyn Tablet, the official paper of the Brooklyn Diocese, emerged in the 1920s as a spokesman for a pugnacious brand of militant Irish Catholic anti-communists. Hear, hear. A fervent Irish nationalist and a battler for Catholic interests, he became the managing editor of the Tablet in 1917, which he since enjoyed with the fervent support of the bishops over the years, but him in full control of the paper. He used his editorials to insist that that America pay attention to Catholic views on communism. Scanlon's perchance for expressing his anti-communism in ethnic terms was an incendiary provocation in the combustible environment of the 1920s. Ethnic urban America predisposed to think of the worst of the rival ethnic communities. Scanlon emphasized the racial and religious backgrounds of the communists, where he inveighed against them. From there, it'll be a short step to libeling whole groups at the belief of the few. Ethnic rage that fueled the anti-communism of Scanlon was, and many other Catholics would be disruptive force throughout the history of American anti-communism. During these years, Catholics' intense hostility towards anything that smelled like communism sometimes widened the gulf between them and immigrant groups. The older stock Americans even separated them from other anti-communist liberals and radicals. Monsignor John A. Ryan, the head of the Social Action Department of the National Catholic Welfare Conference in the America's Church, most prominent liberal resigned from the American Civil Liberties Union, the ACLU, when Norman Thomas made excuses for the Mexican regime's persecution of the church. Thomas, an ordained Presbyterian minister, responded by saying that he was amused to be lectured by Catholics on religious liberty. Okay, blah, blah, blah. The careers of Catholic anti-communists suggests that Catholic anti-communism, while doubtless sincere, was also part of ethnic policies of the day. So, this reminds me of Life of Brian, where Splinter! There's a Splinter group. All right, we're going to do one. I'm skipping ahead here. October 33, Roosevelt. This would be... 33. Roosevelt announced that he invited the Soviets to send a representative to Washington. The same day, he called Father Walsh to the White House, simply as a gesture to allay the predictable response of outrage from the Catholics. Walsh must have wanted to ask the president to demand protection for Catholics in Russia. But he knew he would have exposed himself to the questions from the president, who doubtlessly had been primed by Mrs. Roosevelt, who was no friend of the church, about religious liberty of Protestants and Jews in Catholic countries. November 16, 1933, Roosevelt issued an executive order extending diplomatic recognition to the communist government in Russia. The Brooklyn Tablet protested that 20 million Catholics will look upon this step as treason, not only to them, but to every liberty-loving citizen in our glorious country, but every man and every woman who had suffered or died for it since the Republic's birth in 1776. Americans Catholics, ultra-doctrinaire anti-communism inoculated them, perhaps to a fault. Again, the Soviets' appeals for common front against Hitler, while many Americans were entertaining the idea that anyone committed to fighting Hitler cannot be all bad. Some Catholics believed that there had to be some good in anyone, even Hitler, who fought communism, and that Hitler undoubted anti-communism put him on the same side of the barricades as the Pope, who also claimed to be defending Western civilization against the Bolshevik onslaught. American Catholics unhesitatingly answered the Pope's summons to do battle with anti-communism in 1935. The Catholic war veterans, with the approval of the Pope, launched their own anti-communist drive, Father Pro clubs, named after a priest killed by revolutionaries in Guadalajara, Mexico in 1926. Were launched under the sponsorship of Father Coughlin, who called Pro the first martyr killed by communists in America. In 1936, the Passionist Father published a catechism of communism for Catholic high school students. Well, that's interesting. I wonder if I can find that. I'd like to get a hold of that. When the Spanish Civil War broke out on July 17th of 1936, it soon deepened into the gulf between the New Dealers and American Catholics. For almost all non-Catholic liberals and Protestants, a popular front government of the Spanish Republic coalition elected in 1936, consisting of liberals, anarchists, socialists, and communists. Listen to that. Elected in 1936, consisting of liberals, anarchists, socialists, and communists. Ding, 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 ding. Ding, 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 ding. It represented a courageous defense of the rights of the common man against an old order dominated by aristocracy, the military, and that ancient symbol of evil from the Protestants, the Catholic Church of Spain and Franco's insurrection, backed by the upper classes, bing, 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 ding, 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 by Spanish fascists, supported their allies in Germany and Italy, and the Catholic Church was seen by liberals of the left as an attack that threatened democracy, not only in Spain, but everywhere. So there was this thing post-World War II called, I think what's it called, this is not in my notes, I'm just kind of going off the top of my head. There was this thing called Project Gladius. So the name Gladius, that's what those little one-handed kind of two-sided kind of short swords like that Roman centurions or whatever carry, that was called a gladius. So there was a Project Gladius after World War II where where CIA, the mafia, and the Vatican worked together against communism in Italy post World War II, and this grew, and this became like a thing, like into like the 80s, I believe. So we're going to stop our pre-war stuff here, and we're going to do a break, and then when we come out of the break, we're going to jump to sort of the 70s, which is the sort of the twilight of the anti-communist movement in Catholicism. And then after that, if we still have time, we'll talk about this new guy we got and how he's totally controlled by communists. Spoiler alert!
Learn more at abracast.com. Get bonus content by signing up for the mailing list. Get all that plus many exclusive episodes by supporting the show at patreon.com or subscribestar.com.
All right, we're skipping ahead quite some time. That's just the way it works, buddy. Sorry. President, oh boy, here we go. I have a nickname. I gotta call him one of these couple things every time we talk about him. President, the peanut farmer, Jimmy Carter, made a rejection of anti-communism. See, rejection of anti-communism, a cornerstone of his foreign policy, and this stirred the wrath of a few prominent Catholic anti-communists. But no longer was there this grassroots movement to be mobilized by their outrage when Carter issued his declaration that the nation had freed itself from an inordinate fear of communism at Notre Dame, May 22nd, 1977. His words infuriated Bill Buckley, William F. Buckley Jr., who asked, "What is an inordinate fear of communism?" He pounced on Carter's mention of dictators who joined us in our fear as a reference to Franco, whose fear of communism was as genuine as anybody's would be, whose direct experience of communists during a civil war in which a fair percentage of the population was slaughtered. Norman Podhoretz joined Buckley in calling the speech notorious and complained that it meant Carter believed, with no evidence to support his belief, that historical trends have weakened the foundation of the principles behind containment. A belief that Soviet expansion was almost inevitable and that it must be contained. I think in some ways we are still dealing with this feeble-minded submarine captain's decision to do this. Just look out your windows, bro. Look out your windows. At the time, the Carter administration strode boldly into its brave new post-anti-communist world. There was nothing left of the old Catholic anti-communist movement for many Catholics. The end of the anti-communism meant ridding themselves of the disgrace of their involvement with McCarthyism. So they tied old Joe McCarthy here into Catholicism. That was part of the major thing that I skipped over. That's not why I skipped it over. I skipped it over for time and efficiency. By their reunification, they contributed to the growing conviction that anti-communism was nothing but McCarthyism and good riddance to it. In the wake of Vietnam, Catholics showed how far they had come from their anti-communist days. They joined the movement to repudiate the Cold War and the nuclear deterrent that had long been the basis of the containment policy in the bishop's 1976 letter, to live in Jesus Christ. They told Catholics, with respect to nuclear weapons, at least those with a massive destructive capability, the first imperative is to prevent their use. As possessors of a vast nuclear arsenal, we must also beware that not only is it wrong to attack civilian populations, but it is also wrong to threaten to attack them as part of a strategy of deterrence. Archbishop Kroll of Philadelphia, testifying in favor of SALT II in 1979, argued the primary moral imperative of the nuclear age is to prevent any use of strategic nuclear weapons. The declared intent to use these nuclear weapons involved in our deterrence policy is wrong. He argued that having such weapons was the lesser of two evils, and there was progress towards arms control, but that if there was not, they would not have to be given up. The American Catholic Church, once the most militant bulwark of the church, had become the least warlike. In hoc signo, you will disarm. Thus, it almost makes sense that when the militant anti-communism for the first time entered the White House, it did so in the person of a president who radiated the moral and religious certitude about the evil of communism, the mission of Christianity to oppose it, reminiscent of those first generation Catholic anti-communists immediately after the imposition of martial law, December 13th, 1981. Pope John Paul II and President Ronald Reagan agreed between themselves to do all they could to keep the Solidarity movement alive. In the spring of '82, Reagan and the Pope met for the first time, according to Carl Bernstein, who is a radical leftist. If he wasn't then, he for sure is now. Who managed to uncover the record of the conversation between the president and Pope. Reagan and John Paul shared refusal to accept the fundamental fact of their lifetimes, the division of Europe as mandated at Yalta, and the communist domination of Eastern Europe. The Pope was from Eastern Europe. He was Polish. A free, non-communist Poland, they were convinced, would be a dagger to the heart of the Soviet Empire. And if Poland became democratic, other East European states would follow. Reagan said, "We both felt the great mistake had been made at Yalta and something should be done. Solidarity was the very weapon for bringing about, because it was an organization of laborers in Poland." This is Lech Walesa and all that. These are names that I just know. I grew up in this era. I remember listening to stories on the news about Lech Walesa in Poland. Contrary, as a kid, I'm a kid. Contrary to anything the Soviets would want. During these momentous and climatic events in the history of the church's struggle with communism, there were American Catholics. In point of fact, the recognition of the Catholic character of what was going on in Poland, Reagan did mobilize an elite group of American Catholics to support development there. William Casey, Richard Allen, William Clark, Alexander Haig, Vernon Walters, and the ambassador to the Vatican, William Wilson. There's a lot of waspy names right here. Cardinal John Kroll of Philadelphia, whose father was born in Poland, served as the liaison between Casey and the rest of the hierarchy. But the bishops themselves did nothing to mobilize Catholic laity and support for solidarity. After leading the fight against communism for so long, the American Catholic Church, except for some of its power brokers, was on the sidelines. Why were Catholics, with few exceptions, no longer part of what was left of the anti-communist movement at the end of the 80s? As communism crumbled, American Catholic anti-communism was shaped by two forces critical in the history of American Catholicism. The first was a relationship between Catholics and the rest of the American community. At the time when American Catholics felt themselves at war with much of America, their anti-communism was an expression of their defiant separation from the American mainstream, like eating fish on Fridays and going to church on Sundays and going to their own schools and colleges. Catholics' anti-communism was a badge of difference, proudly worn as a sign of religious communal identity. But as the relationship between Catholics and the rest of America changed in the 60s, after the election of JFK, their anti-communism ceased to be useful as a sign of Catholic difference. It's a branding problem they're having, you see. Indeed, it became valueless, or even worse, a handicap, as Catholics explored ways of signaling their acceptance by America, of their acceptance of America. Plus, their first president, JFK, is running around doing a bunch of communist bullshit. Those American Catholics who had eagerly obeyed the Vatican's earlier call to battle with communism, now in the 60s, just as eagerly obeyed what they saw in the Vatican's new appeal to lay down their anti-communist arms and to make peace with their erstwhile enemies, while the European Church, particularly the Eastern European Church, interpreted Vatican II's revolutionary commitment to the Church to religious liberty as encouragement of a renewed moral struggle with communism. American Catholics instead interpreted it for the cessation of the struggle, intellectual, moral, or otherwise, with communism. According to the conventional American conviction that tolerance means to live and let live, which is another way of saying that when the American Catholics were anti-communist, but when they became Catholic Americans, they were no longer anti-communists. So I'm going to have to save all this extraneous articles for another time, perhaps next time. And we'll wrap this up. But stay tuned until after this info dump, and I will talk a little bit about the perk, the August perk for $5 and $10 Patreon and Subscribe Star supporters. I am John, and this is the Abercast, and I hope everybody's safe, and I hope everyone's gearing up to this. I mean, whatever this Democratic convention is going to turn into is going to be a shit show. There was just stuff on the news today and yesterday about all the security people just pulling out. They're just like, fuck it. But I think there needs to be something. There needs to be something because, I mean, they need to figure out who's going to be their candidate, right? I am not convinced that Joe Biden's going to be the candidate. I can't get my head around it. Anyhow, we'll talk about it more. I'll save these other these contemporary articles, and we'll do something maybe next week about it. And we'll continue this talk about this right now it's Catholicism's communism. You're like, John, what are you talking about? Listen, bro, I'll explain it, all right? Well, listen to this, and then listen to that, and then listen to me talk about this perk card. This August perk thing. All right, bye. Be careful. And if you get COVID-19, it's fine. I just had, literally, I just felt like I had a cold for like a day and a half. That's it.
Thank you for listening to this episode. Send an email or visit us on social media to let us know what you think about this topic. And please remember to leave a 5-star rate and review.
Hey, did you learn something? Did you laugh? Supporting me is a way for you to be a part of the Abercast and ensure its growth and sustainability. It also means I can create a normal schedule for shows and bonus shows, as well as the exclusive Fellowcraft episodes. By supporting the show, you are not only a listener, but you are a part of the show. You supporting the show gives me a way to offer fun rewards as a thank you for showing your appreciation and support for our projects. Do you have an idea for a reward that you don't see? Let me know. My supporters are my partners. I currently pay for you to listen to the Abercast. Not only do I pay the hosting bills out of my own pocket, I volunteer my time and talent to each and every episode of the Abercast. The price of books, the time and resources of reading and researching, the massive amounts of gin and tonic needed, the equipment it takes to record the shows, the time and resources it takes to create the bonus material, and the cost to maintain the internet presence. Is it worth your support? I don't know. I'm proud of the Abercast, and I feel like I'm improving all the time. In addition to creating the show that you dig and that you are excited about, I also have a full-time commitment and other obligations. So why financial support? All of the supporters help me focus my time on the quality and development of the podcast. And what if you can't afford, $1 or $3 or $10 or whatever a month? Believe me, I get that. There are many degrees of support, but if you can't support the show financially, please consider leaving a 5-star rate and review on your preferred podcast app. And don't forget that you could sign into the mailing list and still unlock a lot of bonus content. Thank you. I cannot put into words how much it means to me that you listen to the show each time I post a new episode. Your feedback, support, and love of the stories that we talk about here is what keeps me going. All right, so I said that I was going to talk a little bit about this perk. So on my set of tarot cards, it's got the standard major arcana and minor arcana, right? The major arcana is made up of 3 septenaries. And then the minor arcana is made up of 4 suits, right? So in Crowley's Thoth deck, he does something weird where he includes 3 separate magician cards. So it's like card number 1 is the magician. And then as you're like working your way through it, you're finding a totally different graphic, but it's card number 1 and it's a magician. And then there's a third one, card number 1, magician. All 3 totally different artworks. And So as I was building my deck, I was like, okay, well, I'm going to do the Magician, and the Magician card's beautiful, and I love it, and it's kind of based on my wife. But I was like, what if I did another Magician card? What if I did 2 other Magician cards? So their cards, number 1. I haven't done the third one yet, but what the perk is it's this second Magician card. It's called the Wizard. So you have a magician and a wizard, and it's one of my characters from my graphic novels. It's Cyrus the Dead Guy, and he's chilling out in this giant wing-back chair, and he's got his gin and tonic in one hand and a cigarette in the other, and he has a wand at his feet, and then hanging up in his lounge or wherever he's at, in his drawing room, there's a pentacle hanging up on the wall to his right, and he's got a sword mounted on the wall above his head, and then he's holding his drink in his glass in his left hand. So the wand, cup, sword, and pentacle or coin are totally in the wrong. They're totally in reverse order for the wizard card. But when you look at the magician card, they're all in the correct order. It goes wand, cup, sword, coin. So read into that as you may, but this is the second magician card. It's the wizard card, and it's also numbered 1. I even numbered it. So there's going to be, hey, spoiler alert, there's going to be another magic user card coming along. So even if you don't have the tarot deck, which is fine, I mean, it's cool, but regardless if you have it or you don't have it, it's a cool fucking card. It's a cool fucking thing to have. You can use it as a bookmark. You can use it as a bunch of different stuff. But I used the back of the tarot card as the back of the card itself also. And that if you're a long-time listener of the show and you go back and you listen to the mechanics of the tarot card episodes that I did, you'll see the graphic. The graphic explains the mechanics of the tarot cards in there. It's so cool. But I mean, I don't want to toot my own horn, but it's pretty cool. You can go and see the graphic and the back of the card on my Instagram right now. You can just scroll down a little bit and find it. It's on there. I'm John. This is the Advercast. Please consider joining and getting the perk. Please consider getting the tarot card deck. All right. Full disclosure. If you order the tarot card deck, it's going to take a while to fulfill it because the printer is going through a pandemic fucking problem. They're all right. Anyhow, it's going to take a while. That's why I call it pre-order on the website. If you go to Advercast.com, go to the store section, hit up tarot cards, you'll find how to get in there. Or you just go to Patreon, subscribe star links. You can sign up there. $5 tier or $10 tier, you're going to get the wizard card. I fucking love this card. It's great.